Hello everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I thought that I would talk about my reading in November. So we're already some bits into December and it feels like this month is already flying by. November was not a fantastic reading month for me, not in the sense of I did enjoy what I read, but I wasn't reading that much for most of the month. It was a very slow reading month and I don't really know why. I just wasn't, I was gravitating towards other things and was sort of busy with other things, so it just didn't end up being a very reading heavy month. And I feel like generally speaking my reading has been slowing over the last couple of weeks, but at the moment I am really enjoying what I'm reading, so it's not really a problem. But anyway, so this will probably not be that long. But I also wanted to talk about the books that I'm currently reading because December always seems to be that kind of month that I don't really know if I should do a wrap up for it or not, because it feels like it sort of mixes in with favorites and all of that, and then it's busy to start preparing for the new year. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the books I read in November and what I'm currently reading, and let's get into it. So November was Nonfiction November, of course, and I only finished nonfiction. Actually, I've been mostly reading nonfiction since the beginning of November. So the first book I finished was Childhood by Tove Ditlevsen. This is a Danish author, and I read this first volume of her memoir trilogy in the Swedish translation, so I will put the Swedish translator in the description below. The Swedish translation, for some reason, for the first and second part of this trilogy was released this year in September, almost a year or two after the third had been translated into Swedish. But this book is basically about Tove Ditlevsen's childhood in early 20th century, I think, and I feel like it's centered around the 20s and 30s, if I'm remembering correctly. Honestly, when I started reading this one, I felt kind of underwhelmed, or I didn't feel like anything in particular grabbed me. It was easy to read, particularly as I was reading the Swedish translation. I just felt like it was very easy to digest. But there wasn't anything particular that stood out to me. However, as I got further into it, I felt more invested. So I think with the second and third trilogy part, I would probably enjoy it more. Not to say that I didn't enjoy the first one, I just felt like it was simpler in tone than I was expecting, particularly because it has been raved about. But I feel like towards the end of it I was more gelling with the narrator of this young child's perspective of having dreams and not really having the means to get to the dreams, of being neglected as a girl in comparison to her brothers or brother, can't remember if it's more than one, in like tiny things related to being in an awkward age, being sort of hyper aware of your existence and your every move, and dissecting what could have been and what your actions had, what kind of an effect your actions have in minute detail, that kind of thing. Those things, I think, were captured to the extent that you feel it's kind of relatable in those moments, even though it is almost 100 years ago since the events took place. So I'm looking forward to reading the second and third part. I have that on reservation for my library and we'll get to it when it comes to me. I read this because Roxy from Chaotic Bibliophile is doing a book club every month, and this was her choice for November, so I will link her channel below, and she is going to be doing a more thorough review of this one, so that is definitely worth checking out because she always does such thoughtful discussions and I always feel like I gain something from hearing her points of view. The next one I finished in November was The Butchering Art, Joseph Lister's quest to transform the grisly world of Victorian medicine by Lindsay Fitzharris. So I actually wrote a review for this one. I will link that below. But basically it is very much what it says in the subtitle. It is a Joseph Lister biography to a great extent, and I think that is something I hadn't realized. Even though it says it in the title, I had thought that this was more general medicine history and his career was just part of the discussion, or that it was sort of one person's narrative illuminating further or broader changes in the medicine history, which it does to some extent, but I feel like it is also to a large degree just a Joseph Lister biography. So basically Joseph Lister was trained to be a surgeon, and he was kind of an innovative thinker, so he thought outside the box, thought outside of the usual praxis, and created important changes in the medicine, practicing and in science behind it. We learn about Joseph Lister's life and upbringing, and we learn about his education process and his marriage and his work and career further on, and then through learning about those, of course, we hear about more general medicine history. But I think there was much more biographical details outside of the medicine specifics that I wasn't expecting. So that took me a bit by surprise, and I just wanted to sort of highlight that fact. The biography serves an important purpose in showing us what kind of mind does the medicine innovations, how his own life inspired him to do certain things, or made it possible for him to do certain things. The other thing that I found with this one is, even though I really enjoyed it and I found it easy to read, I also felt like, surprisingly, I was familiar with a lot of this. Aside from the specifics on Joseph Lister's life, the medicine history itself was actually quite familiar to me. So I would say if you've read a lot in this area, then this might not give you tons of new information. It's still entertaining in the way Lindsay Fitzharris puts it together, I think. It was entertaining, but it wasn't as revelatory as I was expecting it to be, and I think it was more just on me. It wasn't necessarily a problem of the book, it was just different from what I was thinking it would be. But on the other hand, because I was so familiar with the topics, I actually found it quite a relaxing book to read, if I could say relaxing of a book that touches on such sometimes stomach-turning details. But because I was familiar with a lot of the topics, I just sort of had the opportunity to just enjoy the way Fitzharris talks about them instead of being focused on taking up all of the details, if that makes sense. Last up for the books I finished in November is Listen to This by Alex Ross. This is a collection of essays on music. So most of these essays have been published previously in The New Yorker in various issues. And so this is basically music journalism, and some of the essays you can definitely tell that they've been created for a very particular purpose, like for example the death of a musician, and the essay goes, you can tell that the essay has the purpose of sort of chronicling a musician's whole career. So the topics of the essays range from notation of music and the performance of particular notations and the freedom of interpretation of that kind of thing, to the recording of music, to world music and influences from different countries and cultures, and to the innovative aspect of music. Like for example, one of the essays talks about, can't remember his name, he uses the recording of nature sounds, Song of the Earth, the Arctic Sound of John Luther Adams. So even just the question of what counts as music, which also comes up with the essay on John Cage, whose name I had heard before, but I knew nothing about his stance with music and his legacy. The one on Chinese music, I'm gonna see Symphony of Millions, Classical Music in China, actually made me annoyed to some extent, because for me at least there seemed to be a sense of expectation on the classical musicians from China to create music that was traditionally Chinese, that they had some kind of obligation to fulfill just because they were from a different tradition and they weren't as free to create Western music, and if they did, then that was a problem. I just didn't like some of the tone in that essay, and I felt like I felt annoyed with some of the points that Alex Ross makes. Even if it wasn't his intention, it felt like someone from the Western world having an opinion on how music is done in another country, from another culture. But then also the Western world, of course, using inspiration from all over the world, and not being criticized for the exact same thing. So that was the only essay that actually made me annoyed. But most of the time I either enjoy them or I was sort of at least willing to go wherever he wanted to go. But some of them have definitely been fantastic and has opened my eyes to new music. So I particularly enjoyed, I think, the essays that focused on composers. For some reason, those really appealed to me, and the process of composing. And whenever Alex Ross goes into that, I found him particularly brilliant. So definitely a book I would recommend if you're into music writing, and I think because it touches on so many different things, it becomes also a tool of discovery, which I really appreciate with reading on music. So those were the books I read in November. I'm just gonna go into briefly the 3 books I am currently reading now in December. So first off, we have Truffle Hound, on the trail of the world's most seductive scent, with dreamers, schemers, and some extraordinary dogs, by Rowan Jacobsen. As soon as it came in the post, I started reading it, and I've been thoroughly enjoying this. I think it has been one of the most enjoyable books I've read all through the year, which is typical. I feel like oftentimes some of the most fun reading I do is at the end of the year, and it might just be that I indulge myself to read books I think I will actually really enjoy and have fun with towards the end of the year, when the year is almost over anyway. That might be the case. Either way, this has been so much my kind of thing. It talks about truffle hunting, as you can probably tell from the title, but Rowan Jacobsen goes to different parts of the world, talks to different members of the truffle hunting world. So he talks to people who have farmed truffles. He talks to people who are experts in truffle hunting themselves, like truffle hunters, traditional and more modern ones. He talks to people who sell truffles. He talks to people who eat and cook truffles, like chefs and that kind of thing. So he just talks to every person you can think of in the chain of the truffle business, and he also kind of, through talking to all of these various people, he explores why truffles are so alluring, why humans are so drawn to them. Not only humans, of course, there's other animals involved in this equation. One of the things I've been really enjoying with this one is that it talks about dogs, and I love dogs so much, but I usually avoid books that have anything to do with dogs, because oftentimes that means that something bad will happen to them, especially when it comes to fiction, or when it comes to nonfiction with a more sort of memoirist type thing. It's a very common thing that something happens to the dog. So with this one, I get to enjoy the mushroom related or the fungi related topic and the dog topic, and it has been just a really fun book, as well as talking about food, which is another area of nonfiction that I really want to read more of, but because I am a vegan, a lot of the time food writing is centered around meat eating or meat cooking, and I find it so difficult to find books that are not, or it's hard for me to know before actually picking one up, and it's not always clear from the get-go. So this one has just sort of combined all the things that I'm interested in, and I really like Rowan Jacobsen's approach to the topic as well. He's passionate and he's inquisitive and curious, but he's also, I think he still has a lot of admiration and respect to the people he talks to, no matter what part of the business they are. I just really gel with his approach and his writing style and his mind, the way he explores all of these things. So definitely a strong recommendation from me. The other book I am currently reading, the other nonfiction I'm currently reading, is Arctic Dreams by Lopez. I finally have gotten around to this one. Again, so far it's been really good, and it's hard to believe it has been published in the 80s because it doesn't feel dated to me. Maybe some of the details in the nature situation has changed because it's written in the 80s and the Arctic is a different place now than it was then, but a lot of his observations still feel so relevant and timely. He talks about different animals that live in the Arctic area. He talks about historic expeditions to this place, the history of this place, and the sort of particularly the Western interest and exploration of it, our understanding of it, the climate, and the indigenous populations around it. So again, a combination of different topics on just one particular region of the earth that is less well known than most of the rest of the world. So the last book that I am currently reading, I have a physical copy here, but I'm actually listening to it as an audiobook. So we have The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. I think I have reread this one before. I am listening to this as an audiobook narrated by Serkis, so that has been fantastic, and I was surprised by how quickly I felt familiar and comfortable in this world. Even though, as I said, I think I have reread this one before, it just felt like an almost instant experience of comfort and of settling in. And the audiobook version that I'm listening to has just been so great, with all of the various dialects and with the members really, the characters really coming to life. So I have this beautiful tiny edition of the whole set, but I couldn't pass up listening to this audio version, and I'm listening to it as I'm knitting, so it's just perfect for this time of year, and I've been really into my knitting recently. I really love the Hobbits, so the Fellowship is one of my favorite parts of the whole story, just because it's so focused on the Hobbits. And Gandalf, of course. So I feel like the characters that I like the most are very centered in this first book. So that makes it particularly enjoyable. And I'm also hoping that I can rewatch all of the movies during the winter holidays. So that is also one of the reasons I wanted to prioritize reading at least the first book, so I can watch the first movie or maybe watch all of the movies and then continue on with the books. We'll see what happens. Those were all of the books I want to talk about today. Let me know if you have read something really great in Nonfiction November, if your Nonfiction November was more reading heavy than mine was. If you've read any of these books, I would love to chat about them in the comments below. Do you have any books that you are still looking to finish before the end of the year, or any books you're thinking of for next year already? I have definitely been thinking about my reading goals, and that video will be coming up soon as well. So that was all I wanted to say. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.